I never thought I would end up in a legal battle over a ditch, but here I am, sitting in a courtroom in Charlotte, North Carolina, watching a middle-aged woman named Patricia explain to a judge why she thought it was acceptable to trespass on my property and destroy my landscaping. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, back when I thought buying a house in the Meadowbrook Estates subdivision would be the best decision of my life. My name is Brandon Turner, and I am a software engineer who spent most of my 20s saving up for a house. When I finally found the perfect property on Elm Ridge Drive, a beautiful 3-bedroom ranch with a large backyard and a circular driveway, I jumped on it. The house had been a foreclosure, which meant I got it for a decent price, but it also meant it needed some work. The previous owners had let things slide, and one of the first projects I wanted to tackle was fixing the drainage issues in the front yard. The property sat on a slight slope, and over the years, erosion had created a shallow ditch along the right side of the driveway. It was not deep enough to be dangerous, maybe 18 inches at its worst point, but it collected water every time it rained and was starting to wash out part of the gravel drive. I had been living there for about 3 months when I finally hired a landscaping company to come out and assess the situation. The landscaper, a guy named Mike who had been doing this kind of work for 20 years, recommended installing a proper drainage system with a decorative stone-lined swale. To do this correctly, we needed to excavate the existing ditch a bit deeper, install drainage pipe, and then fill it with river rock and larger decorative stones. The whole project would take about a week, and Mike warned me that we would need to mark off the work area clearly so nobody accidentally drove into it while we were working. That is when I made my first mistake. I assumed my neighbors would be reasonable people who would see construction stakes and caution tape and think, "Oh, someone is doing yard work. I should stay clear of that area." I had no idea that Patricia Henderson, the self-appointed queen of the Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association, would take personal offense to my home improvement project. The HOA in Meadowbrook Estates was one of those organizations that existed primarily on paper. We paid annual dues of $200, which supposedly went toward maintaining the neighborhood entrance sign and organizing an annual 4th of July barbecue. There was a board of 5 members, but Patricia was the president, and from what I had gathered from talking to other neighbors, she ran the show. She was in her early 50s, with short blonde hair that she kept in that aggressive soccer mom style, and she drove a white Lexus SUV that she treated like a tank. I had only met Patricia once before, about a week after I moved in. She had shown up at my door with a clipboard and a fake smile, welcoming me to the neighborhood while simultaneously handing me a packet of HOA rules and regulations. The document was 37 pages long. I wish I was exaggerating. 37 pages of rules about everything from what color you could paint your mailbox to how tall your grass could be before you got a violation notice. I had skimmed through it, nodded politely, and assured her I would be a good neighbor. She had given me a look that suggested she did not quite believe me, but she left without incident. I thought that would be the end of it. The landscaping crew arrived on a Monday morning in late April. The weather was perfect, sunny and mild, and Mike's team got to work right away. They started by marking out the work area with bright orange stakes connected by yellow caution tape. These stakes were not tiny little things either. They were 3-foot-tall fiberglass poles with reflective tape, the kind you see at construction sites. You could not miss them unless you were deliberately trying to. By Monday afternoon, they had excavated the ditch to about 2 feet deep and were starting to lay the drainage pipe. I was working from home that day, and every couple of hours I would step outside to check on the progress. Everything was going smoothly. Mike assured me they would have the pipe in by Tuesday and would start filling it with stone on Wednesday. Tuesday morning, I woke up to someone pounding on my front door. I stumbled out of bed, checked my phone, and saw it was barely 7 in the morning. Who in their right mind was banging on my door at this hour? I threw on a t-shirt and jeans and made my way downstairs, already annoyed. When I opened the door, Patricia was standing there with her arms crossed, her face twisted into an expression of pure indignation. She was wearing a pink tracksuit and white sneakers that looked like they had never seen a speck of dirt in their lives. "You have a permit for this construction," she demanded, not even bothering with a greeting. I blinked at her, still half asleep. "Good morning to you too, Patricia." "What construction?" She gestured aggressively toward the driveway. This disaster you have created in your front yard. You cannot just dig up your property without getting approval from the HOA board." I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "Patricia, this is drainage work. I am fixing an erosion problem. This does not require HOA approval. It is routine maintenance. According to Article 7, Section 3, Subsection B of the HOA bylaws, any excavation work that alters the natural grade of the property requires board approval and a detailed site plan." She recited from memory, as if she had been preparing for this confrontation. "Patricia, I am not altering the natural grade. There is already a ditch here. I am just making it functional and attractive. This is no different than putting in a flower bed." Her eyes narrowed. "I disagree. I am issuing you a formal violation notice. You need to stop work immediately and submit a request to the board for approval. We will review it at next month's meeting." Next month's meeting. The work will be done in 3 days. I am not halting a legitimate home improvement project because you want to flex your authority. "We will see about that," she snapped. And then she turned on her heel and marched back to her white Lexus, which she had parked directly in front of my house, blocking my mailbox. I watched her drive away, feeling a knot of anxiety forming in my stomach. I had heard stories about nightmare HOAs, but I had hoped Meadowbrook Estates would not be one of them. Clearly, I was wrong. The landscaping crew showed up around 8, and I told Mike about Patricia's visit. He laughed and shook his head. "Yeah, we deal with HOA people all the time. She has no legal standing to stop you. This is basic yard work. Just ignore her." I wanted to believe him, but something about the look in Patricia's eyes made me nervous. This woman was not going to let this go. The crew continued working throughout the day. By Tuesday afternoon, they had the drainage pipe installed and had started filling the ditch with gravel. The stakes were still up, marking the work zone clearly. I went to bed that night hoping the worst was over. I was very wrong. Wednesday morning, I woke up to my doorbell ringing repeatedly. When I answered, Mike was standing there and he did not look happy. "Brandon, you need to come see this," he said. I followed him outside and my stomach dropped. Someone had pulled up all the stakes. Every single one of them was gone. The caution tape was lying on the ground, torn and muddy. And the worst part, fresh tire tracks ran directly through the work area, tearing up the gravel we had just laid and damaging the drainage pipe. "What the hell happened?" I asked, staring at the destruction. "I was going to ask you the same thing," Mike said. "We left everything secure yesterday." "This looks deliberate." I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. The tire tracks were clear and I could see where they had entered the work zone, driven across it, and then looped back onto the driveway. Whoever did this had not done it by accident. "You have any cameras?" Mike asked. I shook my head. "Not yet. I have been meaning to install a security system, but I have not gotten around to it." Mike sighed. "Well, this is going to set us back a day, maybe 2. We need to re-excavate and check for damage to the pipe. and we are going to need to put new stakes up." "Do it," I said, "and make them twice as high. If someone wants to pull these up, I want evidence." While Mike's crew got back to work, I decided to do some investigating of my own. I walked down the street, knocking on doors and asking neighbors if they had seen or heard anything unusual the night before. Most people had not, but Mrs. Chen, who lived 3 houses down, told me something interesting. "I saw Patricia driving around the neighborhood late last night," she said. "Maybe around 11. I thought it was strange because she usually goes to bed early." "Did you see where she went?" Mrs. Chen shook her head. "I was closing my curtains for the night, but her SUV is pretty distinctive, hard to miss." I thanked her and headed back home, my suspicions growing. Patricia had the motive and, apparently, the opportunity. But I needed proof. Mike and his crew spent the rest of Wednesday repairing the damage and installing new stakes. These ones were even taller and had reflective strips all the way up. We also added more caution tape, crisscrossing it in multiple layers. If someone wanted to drive through this work zone now, they would have to deliberately destroy multiple barriers. I went to bed that night with my phone on my nightstand, volume turned all the way up, hoping I would hear something if anyone came back. I did not have to wait long. Around 1 in the morning, I heard the sound of an engine idling in front of my house. I jumped out of bed and looked out my window. Sure enough, there was a white Lexus SUV parked on the street, and Patricia was getting out of the driver's seat with a flashlight. I grabbed my phone and started recording as I watched her walk up my driveway. She looked around nervously, clearly checking to see if anyone was watching, and then she approached the stakes. I could not believe what I was seeing. She grabbed the first stake and started pulling, trying to yank it out of the ground. That was when I decided to intervene. I threw on shoes and a jacket and headed outside, my phone still recording. "Patricia, what are you doing?" I called out as I approached. She spun around, the flashlight beam hitting me in the face. "Brandon, this is private property." "Yes, my private property. You are trespassing." "I am enforcing HOA regulations. You are in violation and I am removing these unsightly markers." "Those markers are there for safety. There is an open work zone. I do not care. This is a violation and I am within my rights to take enforcement action." I could not believe what I was hearing. She genuinely thought she had the authority to come onto my property in the middle of the night and vandalize my landscaping project. "Patricia, you need to leave. Now, or I am calling the police." She laughed, actually laughed. "Go ahead, call them. I am the HOA president. I have authority here." "You have no authority to trespass or commit vandalism. Leave. Now." She glared at me for a long moment and then she turned and marched back to her SUV. But instead of driving away, she sat there with the engine running, staring at my house. I went back inside and immediately called the non-emergency police line. I explained the situation to the dispatcher, who said they would send an officer out to take a report. While I waited, I backed up the video I had just taken to my cloud storage. I was not taking any chances. The police officer arrived about 20 minutes later. By then, Patricia had driven away, but I showed him the video and explained everything that had happened over the past few days. He took notes, looked at the damage from the previous night, and gave me a case number. "Honestly, this is a civil matter," he said. "If she comes back and does it again, call us immediately and we can potentially charge her with trespassing or vandalism. But for now, your best bet is to document everything and consider getting a restraining order if she continues to harass you." I thanked him and went back inside, feeling frustrated. I had video evidence of Patricia attempting to vandalize my property, but apparently that was not enough for criminal charges. I needed to catch her in the act of actually doing damage. I did not have to wait long for that opportunity either. Thursday morning, the landscaping crew returned to finish the job. Mike was getting frustrated with the delays, and I could not blame him. This should have been a simple 3-day project, and we were now on day 4 with no end in sight. "Let's just power through today," Mike said. "We will get the stone in, do the grading, and be done. Even if your crazy neighbor tries something, we can come back and touch up any damage later." The crew worked efficiently, and by Thursday afternoon, the project was nearly complete. The ditch was now a beautiful stone-lined swale with proper drainage. It looked professional and would actually add value to my property. Mike and his guys were packing up their equipment when Patricia's Lexus pulled into my driveway, not onto the street in front of my house. Into my actual driveway. I walked outside to confront her, with Mike following close behind. Patricia got out of her SUV and walked toward us with that same clipboard she had been carrying when I first met her. "I am here to conduct an inspection of the completed work," she announced. "You are not inspecting anything," I said. "You have no authority here. As HOA president, I have the right to ensure all work complies with neighborhood standards. Patricia, you need to leave my property. You are not welcome here." She ignored me and walked toward the new swale, examining it with an exaggerated frown. "This is not up to code. The stones are too large. They are a safety hazard." "They are decorative river rock. They are perfectly safe." "I disagree. I am issuing a violation notice. You have 30 days to remove these stones and restore the area to its original condition." Mike stepped forward. "Madam, with all due respect, this is professional work. There is nothing wrong with it. You are just harassing this guy because you can." Patricia's face turned red. "Excuse me. How dare you speak to me like that? I could have you banned from working in this neighborhood." "You do not have that authority," Mike said calmly. "You are just a homeowner with a title. You are not a government official. You have no power here." I could see Patricia was about to lose it. Her hands were shaking and her voice was getting louder. "I have every right to enforce the rules of this association, and if you continue to defy me, I will make sure you regret it." "Are you threatening me?" I asked, making sure my phone was still recording in my pocket. "It is not a threat. It is a promise. This neighborhood has standards, and I will not let some newcomer come in here and destroy everything we have built. I fixed a drainage problem. That is it. You are being completely unreasonable." She sputtered for a moment, unable to come up with a response, and then she turned and marched back to her Lexus. But instead of backing out of my driveway like a normal person, she decided to make a point. She put the SUV in reverse and started backing up at an aggressive speed, not looking where she was going. Mike and I both shouted at the same time, but it was too late. The back wheels of Patricia's Lexus went right over the edge of the driveway and into the newly completed swale. But here is the thing about swales and drainage ditches. Even when they are filled with stone and properly graded, they are still lower than the surrounding ground. And when you drive a 2-ton SUV into one at speed, physics takes over. The Lexus dropped into the swale with a sickening crunch, the back end sinking into the stones while the front wheels spun uselessly on the pavement. Patricia hit the gas, trying to power out of it, but that only made things worse. The back wheels dug deeper, sending river rocks flying, and the undercarriage of the SUV made a horrible scraping sound as it bottomed out. She finally stopped, and for a moment, there was complete silence. Then Patricia started screaming. "Look what you did. You made me crash. This is your fault. You are going to pay for this." I stood there in stunned disbelief. "Patricia, you drove into the ditch yourself. We tried to warn you. There were no warning signs, no markers. This is a booby trap." Mike pointed at the stakes and caution tape that were still clearly visible around the work area. "Madam, the entire area is marked. You drove around the markers. Patricia tried to open her door, but it would not budge because of the angle of the vehicle. She had to climb out through the passenger side, and when she finally emerged, her face was purple with rage. "I am suing you for everything you have got," she screamed at me. "This is entrapment. This is negligence. I am going to own your house when I am done with you. You drove onto my property without permission and crashed your own car. I think you should call a tow truck." She pulled out her phone and started dialing, pacing back and forth while she waited for someone to answer. When the tow company picked up, she launched into a tirade about how she had been the victim of a malicious trap and needed immediate assistance. While she was on the phone, Mike pulled me aside. "You need to call your insurance company and your lawyer if you have one. This woman is going to try to blame you for this, and you need to protect yourself." He was right. I went inside and made the calls. My homeowner's insurance company took a report and said they would send an adjuster out. I did not have a lawyer yet, but I called a friend who worked in real estate and asked for a referral. He gave me the name of a guy named David Brennan who specialized in property disputes. By the time I got back outside, a tow truck had arrived. The driver took one look at the situation and shook his head. "This is going to be tricky. You backed into a ditch." She drove over my lawn ornaments, Patricia insisted. "This is vandalism." The tow truck driver looked at the stakes and caution tape and then back at Patricia. "Madam, this area is clearly marked. How did you not see it?" "That is not the point. The point is that this ditch is a hazard and should not be here." The driver did not argue. He just hooked up the Lexus and started the process of extracting it from the swale. It took about 45 minutes and required some creative maneuvering, but eventually he got the SUV back onto solid ground. The damage was significant. The rear bumper was cracked, the undercarriage had deep scrapes, and one of the back wheels looked bent. Patricia signed the paperwork and climbed into the tow truck to follow her car to the repair shop. Before she left, she pointed at me and said, "You have not heard the last of this." After she was gone, Mike surveyed the damage to the swale. The river rocks were scattered and the grading was messed up, but the drainage pipe was intact. "We can fix this tomorrow," he said. "But man, you have got yourself a problem with that woman." That night I could not sleep. I kept replaying the events of the day in my head, wondering how things had escalated so quickly. All I had wanted to do was fix a drainage problem, and now I was in the middle of a war with my HOA president. The next morning, I called David Brennan, the property attorney my friend had recommended. I explained the entire situation, sent him the videos and photos I had taken, and asked for his advice. David listened carefully and then said, "Brandon, you are in the right here. You have not violated any HOA rules and Patricia has trespassed on your property multiple times. The fact that she drove into your drainage ditch is entirely her fault, but here is the problem. She's going to come after you with everything she has got. People like this do not back down. They double down. So what should I do? First, we are going to send a cease and desist letter to Patricia and the HOA board, demanding that she stop harassing you. Second, we are going to file a complaint with the county about her conduct as HOA president. Third, if she continues, we will pursue a restraining order. And if she tries to sue you, we will countersue for harassment and property damage. This is insane. All I did was fix a ditch. Welcome to the wonderful world of HOA disputes. I have seen cases like this drag on for years. But you have documentation, you have witnesses, and you have the law on your side. You are going to be fine." David drafted the cease and desist letter and sent it via certified mail to Patricia's address and to the HOA board's registered address. In the letter, he outlined all of Patricia's actions, including the trespassing, the attempted vandalism, and the property damage she had caused. He demanded that she stop all contact with me and refrain from any further interference with my property. I thought that would be the end of it. But I was wrong again. The following week, I received a letter from the HOA board. It was a formal hearing notice, stating that I was being charged with multiple violations of the HOA bylaws, including unauthorized construction, creating a safety hazard, and causing damage to a board member's vehicle. The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks out, and I was required to attend. I immediately forwarded the letter to David, who laughed when he read it. "This is ridiculous. They are just retaliating because you stood up to Patricia. We are going to tear this apart." The 2 weeks leading up to the hearing were tense. I kept waiting for Patricia to do something else crazy, but she stayed away from my property. Mike and his crew came back and repaired the wall. And this time, I had a security camera installed so I could monitor the front of my house 24/7. The hearing was held at the community center in Meadowbrook Estates, a small building near the neighborhood entrance that was mostly used for the annual barbecue and the occasional yard sale. When I arrived with David, there were already about a dozen people in the room, including Patricia and the other 4 board members. Patricia was sitting at a table in the front, looking smug. The other board members looked uncomfortable, like they did not really want to be there but felt obligated to support their president. The hearing started with Patricia reading a prepared statement. She accused me of violating multiple HOA rules, creating a dangerous condition on my property, and causing her to have an accident that resulted in thousands of dollars in vehicle damage. She demanded that I be fined $5,000 and required to remove the drainage swale immediately. When she was done, David stood up and calmly dismantled every single one of her claims. He presented the videos I had taken, showing Patricia trespassing on my property and attempting to pull up the stakes. He showed the police report from the night I had called about her harassment. And most importantly, he presented the video from the day of the accident, which clearly showed Patricia driving recklessly and ignoring the clearly marked work zone. "Your client," David said, addressing the board, "has engaged in a pattern of harassment and intimidation against my client. She has trespassed on his property multiple times, attempted to vandalize his landscaping project, and ultimately caused her own accident through reckless driving. None of Mr. Turner's actions have violated any HOA rules, and this hearing is nothing more than retaliation." One of the board members, a man named Frank who looked to be in his 60s, raised his hand. "Can I say something?" Patricia glared at him, but he continued anyway. "I have been on this board for 10 years, and I have to say, I have never been comfortable with how Patricia handles disputes. This seems like a personal vendetta, not a legitimate HOA issue." Another board member, a woman named Susan, nodded. "I agree. I reviewed the bylaws before this meeting, and I do not see any violations. Brandon was doing routine maintenance on his property." Patricia's face turned red. "He excavated without board approval. That is a clear violation." David shook his head. "The bylaw you are referring to applies to excavations that alter the natural grade of the property for construction purposes, such as building a retaining wall or adding a structure. Drainage work is specifically exempted under Section 12, which allows for maintenance and improvements that prevent erosion and water damage." Patricia sputtered, flipping through her copy of the bylaws. "That is not what it says. Actually, it is. Would you like me to read it aloud?" The room fell silent. It was clear that Patricia had not actually read the entire bylaws document and had just assumed she could interpret it however she wanted. Frank cleared his throat. I move that we dismiss all charges against Brandon Turner and issue a formal apology for this hearing." Susan immediately seconded the motion. Patricia looked like she was about to explode. "You cannot do that. I am the president, and we are the board," Frank said firmly. All in favor, 3 hands went up, including Frank's and Susan's. The other 2 board members hesitated, clearly afraid of Patricia's wrath, but eventually they raised their hands too. "Motion passes," Frank said. "Brandon, we apologize for wasting your time. Patricia, we need to have a separate discussion about your conduct as president." Patricia stood up so fast her chair fell over. "This is unacceptable. You are all conspiring against me. I will not stand for this." She grabbed her papers and stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. After she left, Frank approached me and shook my hand. "I am sorry about all this. Patricia has been getting more and more difficult over the past year, and several of us have been discussing whether we need to replace her. This might be the final straw." "I appreciate that," I said. "I just want to live in my house in peace." "You deserve that. Again, we are sorry." David and I left the community center, and I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders. It was over. Patricia had been humiliated in front of the entire board, and I had been completely vindicated. But of course, Patricia was not done yet. A few days later, I received a summons. Patricia was suing me in civil court for property damage, emotional distress, and negligence. She was asking for $50,000 in damages. I called David immediately, and he did not seem surprised. Like I said, people like this do not back down, but do not worry. We have all the evidence we need to destroy this case. And once we do, we are going to countersue her for harassment, legal fees, and property damage. The legal process moved slowly. It took months for the case to actually make it to court, and during that time, Patricia continued to make my life difficult in small ways. She filed noise complaints with the county whenever I mowed my lawn. She sent letters to my neighbors warning them that I was a dangerous homeowner who did not respect community standards. She even tried to get the county to inspect my property for code violations, but the inspector found nothing wrong through it all. I documented everything. Every letter, every complaint, every interaction. David assured me that all of this would help our case. Finally, in late October, we had our day in court. The trial was held in Mecklenburg County Civil Court, and I was nervous despite David's reassurances. Patricia had hired a lawyer, a slimy-looking guy named Richard who specialized in personal injury cases. The trial lasted 2 days. Patricia's lawyer tried to paint me as a reckless homeowner who had created a dangerous trap on my property. He brought in an expert who claimed that the wall should have had additional warning signs and barriers. He even tried to argue that I had deliberately designed the wall to cause accidents. It was absurd, but Richard was good at making it sound plausible. For a moment, I worried that the jury might actually buy it. Then it was our turn. David presented all the evidence we had gathered. The videos, the photos, the police reports, the testimony from Mike and his landscaping crew, and the records of Patricia's harassment. He called Frank and Susan from the HOA board to testify about Patricia's conduct and the hearing where she had been overruled. The turning point came when David played the video of Patricia's accident. You could see her backing up recklessly, ignoring the stakes and caution tape, and driving straight into the swale. There was no question that it was entirely her fault. David then called an expert witness, a civil engineer who testified that the swale was properly designed and clearly marked, and that there was no way someone could accidentally drive into it unless they were not paying attention. Patricia took the stand to defend herself, and it did not go well. She was combative, argumentative, and kept insisting that she had been the victim of a conspiracy. At one point, she accused the judge of being biased against her, which did not earn her any points. When the jury went to deliberate, I felt cautiously optimistic. David seemed confident, but I had learned not to count my chickens before they hatched. The jury came back after just 2 hours. They found in my favor on all counts. Patricia's lawsuit was dismissed, and the jury agreed that she had been the cause of her own accident, but we were not done yet. David immediately filed our countersuit, asking for reimbursement of legal fees, compensation for the time and stress Patricia had caused me, and damages for the harassment. We also asked for a restraining order to prevent Patricia from contacting me or coming onto my property. The judge granted the restraining order on the spot. He also ordered Patricia to pay my legal fees, which had totaled nearly $15,000 by that point. Patricia looked like she was going to faint. Her lawyer tried to argue, but the judge shut him down. "Miss Henderson, your conduct in this matter has been reprehensible. You have abused your position as HOA president, harassed your neighbor, and wasted this court's time with a frivolous lawsuit. You are lucky I am not holding you in contempt." As we left the courtroom, I felt a sense of relief I had not experienced in months. It was finally over, but there was one more twist to the story. About a week after the trial, I received a letter from Frank. He informed me that the HOA board had held an emergency meeting and voted unanimously to remove Patricia as president. She was also being removed from the board entirely due to her conduct. The letter included an apology on behalf of the entire association and a promise that nothing like this would ever happen again. I also learned, through the neighborhood grapevine, that Patricia and her husband were putting their house up for sale. Apparently, the humiliation of losing the lawsuit and being kicked off the HOA board was too much for her to handle. Within 2 months, they had moved out of Meadowbrook Estates entirely. Frank took over as the new HOA president, and under his leadership, the association became much more reasonable. He reduced the bylaws document from 37 pages to a more manageable 10, focusing on actual community concerns rather than petty rules. He also implemented a new policy requiring board approval for any enforcement actions, preventing future presidents from abusing their power the way Patricia had. As for me, I finally got to enjoy my house in peace. The drainage swale worked perfectly, preventing any erosion issues even during heavy rainstorms. I installed a full security camera system around my property, just in case, but I never needed it. My neighbors, who had been watching the whole drama unfold, were universally supportive. Several of them stopped by to apologize for not standing up to Patricia sooner. Mike, the landscaper, left me a 5-star review and even used photos of my swale on his company website as an example of his work. He told me that the whole ordeal had actually been good for his business because it showed that he stood by his clients even when things got difficult. The following spring, the new HOA board asked if I would be willing to join as a member. I politely declined. I had seen enough of HOA politics to last me a lifetime, but I did agree to help Frank revise the bylaws, making sure they were clear, reasonable, and could not be abused by future board members. I also got a dog, a golden retriever I named Cooper. He loved running around the backyard and had a particular fondness for splashing in puddles, including the ones that occasionally formed in the swale during rainstorms. Watching him play brought me more joy than I had expected, and it reminded me why I had bought the house in the first place. One afternoon in May, about a year after the whole ordeal had ended, I was sitting on my front porch with a beer watching Cooper chase butterflies in the yard. Frank walked by with his wife and they stopped to chat. "You know, Brandon, you did this neighborhood a favor," Frank said. Patricia had been running roughshod over everyone for years, but nobody had the guts to stand up to her. "You showed us that she was not invincible." "I did not set out to be a hero," I said. "I just wanted to fix a ditch." Frank laughed. "Sometimes that is all it takes. One person willing to say no." After they left, I sat there thinking about everything that had happened. It had been one of the most stressful periods of my life, but it had also taught me some important lessons. I learned that bullies only have power when people are afraid to challenge them. I learned the importance of documentation and evidence. And I learned that having good people in your corner, whether it is a skilled lawyer, a supportive landscaper, or reasonable neighbors, makes all the difference. The legal battle had cost me time, money, and a lot of sleepless nights. But in the end, I had won. Patricia was gone, the neighborhood was better off, and I had my peaceful life back. And that stupid drainage ditch, it still looks beautiful. The river rocks have settled nicely, moss has started growing along the edges, and it handles water runoff perfectly. Every time I look at it, I remember the whole crazy saga and smile. Because that ditch, that simple home improvement project, had become a symbol of something bigger. It represented standing up for yourself, refusing to be intimidated, and proving that even the most difficult people can be defeated if you are willing to fight back. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that Patricia and her husband had moved to a different subdivision on the other side of Charlotte, one with an even stricter HOA. Part of me felt bad for her new neighbors, but mostly I just felt grateful that she was no longer my problem. The insurance situation had been interesting too. Patricia had tried to file a claim against my homeowner's insurance for the damage to her Lexus, but my insurance company had laughed it off after reviewing the evidence. They determined that she was 100% at fault for her own accident, and they refused to pay a dime. Patricia's own insurance company had been equally unsympathetic, and from what I heard, they had raised her rates significantly after the incident. The county inspector who had come out at Patricia's request had actually been helpful in an unexpected way. After finding no violations on my property, he had taken a look at Patricia's house and discovered that she had an unpermitted deck addition in her backyard. The irony was not lost on anyone. The woman who had spent months trying to find violations on my property had been violating building codes herself. She had been forced to pay a fine and bring the deck up to code before she could sell her house. As the months passed and life returned to normal, I found myself becoming more involved in the neighborhood community. Not in an official HOA capacity, but just as a good neighbor. I helped Frank organize the 4th of July barbecue, which was actually fun without Patricia's micromanaging. I joined a group of neighbors who got together once a month for a poker night. I even started a neighborhood watch program after a series of car break-ins occurred a few streets over. The story of my battle with Patricia became something of a legend in Meadowbrook Estates. New neighbors moving in would hear about it and often sought me out to get the full story. I always told it honestly, not trying to make myself look like a hero, but not downplaying Patricia's unreasonable behavior either. It became a cautionary tale about what could happen when HOAs were run by the wrong people. David Brennan and I stayed in touch too. He told me that my case had become a teaching example in HOA law circles. He had presented it at a conference for property attorneys, using it to illustrate the importance of documentation and the limits of HOA authority. He also mentioned that several other homeowners in similar situations had reached out to him after hearing about the case, and he had been able to help them stand up to their own HOA bullies. One unexpected consequence of the whole ordeal was that it inspired the Meadowbrook Estates Board to completely restructure how the HOA operated. Under Frank's leadership, they implemented term limits for board members, created a formal appeals process for violations, and established clear guidelines for what constituted a legitimate enforcement action. They also started publishing detailed financial reports showing exactly where the annual dues were being spent, something Patricia had never done. The changes were so successful that other HOAs in the Charlotte area started adopting similar reforms. Frank was invited to speak at a regional HOA conference, where he talked about the importance of transparency and accountability in neighborhood governance. He always credited me with being the catalyst for change, though I insisted I had just been trying to fix a drainage problem. Cooper, my golden retriever, became something of a neighborhood celebrity. He was friendly with everyone and had a habit of visiting the other dogs on our street during our evening walks. Kids loved him, and he loved the attention. On more than one occasion, I came home to find Cooper in a neighbor's backyard, playing with their children while the parents laughed and assured me it was fine. He was the kind of dog that brought people together, which was exactly what the neighborhood needed after the divisiveness Patricia had created. There was one more legal footnote to the story that I should mention. About 6 months after the trial, Patricia's lawyer Richard was actually disbarred. It turned out he had been involved in several cases where he had encouraged clients to file frivolous lawsuits and had even been caught fabricating evidence. My case was not the reason for his disbarment, but it was mentioned in the State Bar Association's report as an example of his questionable practices. When David told me about it, I felt vindicated all over again. It confirmed that I had been right to fight back. As for the financial impact, the restraining order and the judgment in my favor meant that Patricia had to pay my legal fees, which softened the blow considerably. I did still have to pay for the repairs to the swale after her accident, which cost about $800, but Mike gave me a discount since he felt bad about all the trouble I had gone through. All told, the whole ordeal probably cost me around $2,000 out of pocket, plus countless hours of stress and aggravation. But it was worth it to establish the principle that I would not be bullied on my own property. The house itself appreciated in value after the improvements I made. The drainage swale not only looked good but actually solved a real problem, which was attractive to potential buyers. Not that I was planning to sell, but it was nice to know that my investment had paid off. I also added some other landscaping features, including a stone walkway leading to the backyard, and a small patio area where I could grill and entertain friends. Looking back on the whole experience now, from the perspective of someone who has lived through it and come out the other side, I can see how it changed me. Before Patricia came into my life, I was the kind of person who avoided conflict. I would rather let things slide than make waves. But dealing with her taught me that sometimes you have to stand up for yourself, even when it is uncomfortable and scary. Bullies rely on people backing down, and when you refuse to do that, they do not know how to handle it. I also learned a lot about the law, more than I ever wanted to know about HOA regulations and property rights. But that knowledge has been useful in other areas of my life. When my company tried to implement an unfair policy change, I was able to push back effectively because I understood how to document issues and build a case. When a contractor tried to overcharge me for some work on the house, I knew how to negotiate from a position of strength. The skills I developed during the fight with Patricia have served me well. The neighborhood itself changed too. People became more engaged and more willing to speak up when something was not right. The HOA board meetings, which used to be sparsely attended affairs where Patricia would dominate the conversation, became lively discussions where multiple viewpoints were heard and considered. The annual dues were actually reduced after Frank discovered that Patricia had been padding the budget with unnecessary expenses. Morale improved, and Meadowbrook Estates became a genuinely pleasant place to live. I did run into Patricia one more time, about a year and a half after she had moved away. I was at a home improvement store on the other side of town, looking at paint colors for my guest bedroom when I saw her in the plumbing aisle. She saw me too, and for a moment, we just stared at each other. I could see the anger flash in her eyes, that same indignant rage that had fueled her crusade against me. But then something changed. Her shoulders sagged, and she looked away, pushing her cart in the opposite direction. I did not follow her or try to start a conversation. There was nothing left to say. She had lost, and she knew it. Whatever satisfaction I might have gotten from rubbing it in was not worth reopening old wounds. I finished my shopping and left, feeling nothing but relief that she was no longer part of my life. The really interesting development came about 2 years after everything had settled down. Frank approached me with an idea. He wanted to nominate me for a position on the HOA board. Several members were stepping down, and he thought I would bring a valuable perspective given everything I had been through. I was hesitant at first. The last thing I wanted was to get sucked into HOA politics. But Frank made a good argument. You understand better than anyone what it is like to be on the receiving end of HOA overreach, he said. You could help make sure that never happens to anyone else in this neighborhood. I thought about it for a few days and eventually agreed to run. To my surprise, I won by a landslide. Apparently, my reputation as the guy who had stood up to Patricia Henderson had made me popular with my neighbors. They trusted me to be fair and reasonable, and they knew I would not abuse the position. Serving on the HOA board was actually a positive experience. We handled the usual mundane stuff, like approving exterior paint colors and organizing community events, but we also worked on some more meaningful projects. We set up a neighborhood assistance fund to help residents who were struggling financially. We organized cleanup days where neighbors would work together to maintain common areas. We even started a community garden where anyone could grow vegetables. The best part was seeing how much healthier the neighborhood dynamics became. People were not afraid of the HOA anymore. They saw it as a resource and a support system rather than an enforcement agency. When disputes arose between neighbors, we helped mediate rather than taking sides. The whole atmosphere of Meadowbrook Estates changed from one of fear and resentment to one of cooperation and community. My drainage swale, that simple home improvement project that had started the whole mess, became a point of pride. Other neighbors started improving their own properties, adding similar drainage solutions and landscaping features. The neighborhood began to look better overall, and property values increased. It was a rising tide that lifted all boats, which was exactly what a good HOA should do. I served on the board for 3 years before deciding I had done my part, and it was time to let someone else take a turn. By then, the culture shift was complete. The new board members understood the importance of restraint and common sense, and I trusted them to carry on the work we had started. These days, life is pretty calm. I still live in the same house on Elm Ridge Drive. Cooper is older now but still loves his walks around the neighborhood. The drainage swale still works perfectly, and the landscaping has matured beautifully. I have got a good group of friends among my neighbors, and we look out for each other. Every once in a while, someone will bring up the story of Patricia Henderson and ask me to tell it again. I usually oblige, because it is a good story and because it contains important lessons. but I try not to dwell on it too much. She was a chapter in my life, an unpleasant one, but she is gone now. The neighborhood is better off without her, and so am I. The ultimate irony of the whole situation is that Patricia had been so convinced that my drainage swale was going to lower property values and ruin the neighborhood aesthetic. In reality, it enhanced both. The professional landscaping made my property look better, which encouraged other neighbors to improve their properties, which raised values across the board. Her dire predictions had been completely wrong, and the neighborhood thrived in her absence. I never did find out what happened to Patricia in her new subdivision. Part of me is curious whether she learned anything from our conflict, whether she approached her new HOA role with more humility and reason. But mostly, I do not care. She is someone else's problem now, and I have moved on with my life. What I do know is that I am a different person than I was before all this happened. I am more confident, more willing to stand up for what is right, and more knowledgeable about my legal rights as a homeowner. I also have a deeper appreciation for good neighbors and reasonable people. The folks in Meadowbrook Estates rallied around me when I needed support, and I will never forget that. The experience also taught me the value of documentation. I still maintain those security cameras around my property, and I keep detailed records of any interactions with contractors, service providers, or anyone else who comes onto my land. It is not that I am paranoid, but I learned that having evidence can make all the difference when disputes arise. It is a small price to pay for peace of mind. Looking at my house now, with its beautiful landscaping, updated drainage system, and well-maintained exterior, I feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. This is my home, the place I worked hard to afford and have invested time and money into improving. Nobody has the right to come onto my property and tell me what I can or cannot do, especially not when I am making legitimate improvements that comply with all applicable laws and regulations. The drainage swale, that simple feature that caused so much trouble, has become something of a conversation piece when I have visitors. People always comment on how nice it looks, and then they ask about the story behind it. I give them the abbreviated version, unless they really want the full details. Most find it hard to believe that something so innocuous could spark such an intense conflict, but that is the nature of HOA disputes. They often start over minor issues and escalate quickly when egos and authority get involved. If I could go back in time and avoid the whole mess, I am not sure I would. Yes, it was stressful and expensive and took up way too much of my time and mental energy. But it also brought about positive changes in the neighborhood, helped me grow as a person, and gave me friendships and experiences I never would have had otherwise. Sometimes the difficult paths in life are the ones that teach us the most. I do occasionally wonder what would have happened if I had just backed down when Patricia first confronted me. If I had halted the landscaping project and gone through her ridiculous approval process, maybe she would have left me alone, but I doubt it. People like Patricia always find something to complain about. If it had not been the drainage swale, it would have been the color of my mailbox or the height of my grass, or the fact that I parked my car on the street instead of in the garage. Standing up to her was the right choice, not just for me but for everyone else in the neighborhood who had been quietly suffering under her tyrannical rule. The legal system worked the way it was supposed to in my case, which is not always guaranteed. I had a good lawyer, solid evidence, and a judge who saw through Patricia's nonsense. But I recognize that I was also fortunate. If I had not been able to afford a lawyer, or if the videos had not been so clear, or if the jury had been less reasonable, things could have gone very differently. That is why I try to help other people who find themselves in similar situations, offering advice and support based on my experience. The story of Patricia Henderson pulling up my driveway stakes and then driving into my ditch has become a sort of cautionary tale in Charlotte HOA circles. When new board members are being trained, they are sometimes told about what not to do, with my case serving as the prime example. David Brennan told me that at least 3 local HOAs have reformed their practices specifically to avoid becoming the next Patricia Henderson scandal. So in a weird way, all the stress and conflict led to something positive. The neighborhood is better. Other neighborhoods have improved their governance. People are more aware of their rights as homeowners. And I got to keep my beautiful drainage swale that works exactly as intended and looks great doing it. As I sit here on my porch, watching the sun set over Meadowbrook Estates, with Cooper snoring at my feet and a cold drink in my hand, I feel content. This is my home, my sanctuary, my place of peace. I fought for it, literally and legally, and I won. Patricia Henderson is nothing but a bad memory now, a story I tell at parties and poker nights. The ditch is still there, perfectly functional and beautifully landscaped, a permanent reminder that sometimes you have to stand your ground and fight for what is right. And every time it rains and I watch the water flow smoothly through that drainage system, carrying away potential erosion and foundation problems, I smile and think about how a simple home improvement project changed everything.